Edward Douglas White, Jr., the ninth Chief Justice of the United States. He was born November 3, 1845, in Thibodaux, Louisiana. White's father, Edward Douglas White, Sr., was a judge, U.S. Congressman, and the 10th Louisiana governor. White attended Mount St. Mary's College, the Jesuit College in New Orleans, and Georgetown College, Washington, D.C. During these years, White also fought for the Confederates in the Civil War before returning to study law in New Orleans. Eventually, he was admitted to the bar and began practice in New Orleans. In 1879, White became a judge in the Louisiana Supreme Court. He also served in the U.S. Senate from 1891 to 1894. Later that year, in 1894, White was appointed Associate Justice of the Supreme Court by President Grover Cleveland. In 1910, White was made Chief Justice by President William Howard Taft. White became the first Southerner to lead the Supreme Court since Roger Taney. White made some notable decisions during his time as Chief Justice. One came about during the case against the American Tobacco Company and the Standard Oil Company in 1911. He wrote the Rule of Reason. This showed the difference between legal and illegal business combinations. Also, in 1916, White upheld the Adamson Act. The Adamson Act created an 8-hour workday for railroad workers. Edward Douglas White, Jr. served as Chief Justice until his death on May 19, 1921.
In 2006, Lance Corporal Matthew Snyder was killed in the line of duty in Iraq. At his funeral, a group of protesters from the Westboro Baptist Church picketed 1,000 feet away, displaying offensive signs thanking God for dead soldiers. The Westboro Baptist Church believes that God punishes the United States for its tolerance of homosexuality, especially within the military. To demonstrate their beliefs, Fred Phelps and his followers often picket military funerals such as this one. The church notified local authorities in advance that they intended to picket the funeral, staged the picket on public land, and complied with all police instructions. They also sang hymns and recited Bible verses. Albert Snyder, the father of the deceased Marine, saw the church members on the day of the funeral but was unable to read their signs or understand what they were saying. It wasn't until he saw a news story about the funeral and picketing that he finally became aware of the church's message. Snyder sued Phelps and the Westboro Baptist Church, claiming that their actions caused him severe emotional distress. In defense, Phelps argued that his speech was protected under the Free Speech Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution. A jury in the United States District Court for the District of Maryland agreed with Albert Snyder and awarded him with a total of $10.9 million, which was then lowered to $5 million. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the judgment, holding the Phelps speech was protected by the First Amendment. On March 8, 2010, the case was granted permission to proceed to the Supreme Court in order to decide if the First Amendment protected protesters at a funeral from liability for intentionally inflicting emotional distress on the family of the deceased. On March 2, 2011, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Phelps and the church. The Supreme Court affirmed the lower court's decision in an opinion by Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr. The court held that the First Amendment protects those who stage a protest at the funeral of a military service member from liability. And although the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment does protect the church, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito filed a lone dissent, expressing his feelings, saying, "Our profound national commitment to free and open debate is not a license for the vicious verbal assault that occurred in this case."